And then we will hear from Vegard Hovland Ottervig. He is working for Enonic in the marketing department, and he will talk about Headless CMS for marketeers.
Okay, then let's talk about some context first for Headless and how it arose and why it did appear at all. One of the first things to speak about in the context and the background is the phenomenon of omnichannel. I guess most of you have, as marketers, have already heard about omnichannel. It basically means that it's not just one channel anymore. It is as in the past, the main channel was like web on a desktop or a laptop. That was it. That was the digital channel, so to speak. But in the last 10, 15 years, there has been a slow rise in several channels, like apps on mobile phones, wearables, like a smartwatch or a Fitbit band, IoT in the form of IoT stands for Internet of Things, and it's in the form of everything that can be connected to the internet, like a refrigerator or coffee making machine, digital signage, APIs everywhere. So the point is that whereas before you had one channel, today you have channels everywhere, and you need to reach the audience often in multiple touch points, and this is why it's called omnichannel, because it's you have to have a strategy that is taking into perspective that you have to be everywhere at once, at least where your audiences are. So the rise of omnichannel is one of the main backgrounds for the rise of Headless CMS, and the other perspective is the technical development. Headless CMS is not easy or possible without rich front-end frameworks. These are, you probably heard of some of them, like Angular or Vue or React. And front-end frameworks, they basically controls the logic, structure, design, behavior, and animation of every element you see on screen when you interact with websites, web applications, and mobile apps. And they can take many forms, like a static HTML site, a single page app, links, images, functions, and drag and drop within a standard web page. So together with omnichannel and technical development, you get it converged into a new demand, and this leads to Headless CMS. But what is Headless CMS? The standard tell is that before you had content interlocked with design and functions. So at the left side here we see a standard web page with some text and design. And it's not easy to just transfer that text and design, which is locked together, to any of these devices you see on the right side, which is a wearable. It's an old school television, but let's pretend that it's a smart television, mobile apps, a chat, sound. So it's not easy. It's most likely impossible. You might recognize a standard example in the form of not responsive design, but that's just one of the aspects. But Headless solves at least some of these problems. It separates content and presentation. At the left side, you see content and presentation together. But what if you pull out the content? Like in this example, it's hello there and how are you? I'm fine. And then you can put, and then you separate the presentation as well, as you see on the far right side. Then here the design and functionality is disparate from the content. And this means that you can actually put hello there and how are you, I'm fine, and images and sound bites and whatever into each of these channels that we spoke of from the omnichannel point. This means that a headless CMS basically, essentially, means you can create content once for multiple channels. So see in this graph, you have like one source of information in the bottom. It feeds into an API. An API is a software that can make two programs speak together. Put bluntly in marketing speak. And you see here that you can put these different types of content, the same content from one source, into multiple devices. Each device that or channel that fits your purpose the best. So here's another example. At the left, we can see pure content in the form of a title, an image, or an emoji in this case, just to illustrate an image, an intro text, a subtitle, body text, and so on. And you can then, via an API, feed these or retrieve the different channels or clients, as they are called. They can retrieve the specified types of content into each different channel's needs. So, for instance, it makes sense to have maybe the title and intro text and an image on an app, and the very same content can be displayed in an entirely different manner in a full-blown desktop web experience in the bottom. So same content, same source of authoring, and wildly different ways of presenting them in different channels. Essentially, a headless CMS is a database plus an API. So the database contains structured content in this form. This is the best image I could find for structured content. It means that the content is treated the same way. It has the same fields. It can be treated in a foreseeable manner every time. And in that way, you can use an API in this form of a radio tower to just send content wherever you need it. And then the clients will retrieve what they are specified to retrieve of the content. For instance, a title or just a block of the content, or a form that says date and time and so on, and maps, you name it. But what does this all mean for marketing? It can improve the quality of your content. You can now, instead of wrangling with presentation and struggling with how it looks, you can just focus on the content, the pure content itself, the text, the video, the image, and not struggle and fight with the way it looks, because you don't know how it will look necessarily. You don't know where necessarily what channel it will be on. And it can also create consistency across channels. Instead of having like 5 editors or even 5 teams working on 5 types of content about the same theme, but in 5 different channels, you can now work from a single point of authoring and content editing experience, and have the same tone of voice, the same branding, the same information from one place, and just distribute it to several places. So it can ensure consistency across channels for your brand. And because it's a single point of authoring source, you can save time. The same content can be reused in different channels. And it's the wrestling point here is also taken up before. You don't have to fight and wrestle with design elements and page setups as much as before, at least. Your visibility might be increased, because before, a web page on a desktop or laptop, or even a responsive one in a mobile browser, that was it. put bluntly. But today you can distribute your content to more apps, wearables, IoT, in-store beacons, self-service machines, digital signage, smart TVs, and it's practically endless what channels you can distribute your content in. It all depends on where your target audience is and what you need and what they need. Overall, Headless CMS can improve the customer journey. It can fill in, cover all or most of the digital touch points with less editorial effort, so to speak. Happy shopping. But not everything is a bed of roses for Headless CMS, of course, like most things in the world. So here are top 5 challenges that we in Enonic have identified with Headless CMS, at least for editors and marketers. There's no natural preview in a pure Headless CMS because content and presentation layers are separated. This means that you work with pure content in a text editor, but how will it look? You don't know it because there's no real linkage to a presentation. But a default view can be set up, so you can see some rough approximation of how your content will look in different scenarios. For instance, a web version or a mobile version and so on. This can be set up by a developer. A visual page editor is not an integral part of a pure Headless CMS. Again, because a Headless CMS is mainly focused on the database and pure structured content, but they can be integrated through third parties. And Headless is mostly developer driven. The developers love Headless CMS, and marketers and editors might not necessarily love it as much due to the lack of presentation and stuff like that. And it can be more work to let non-techies like us manage content websites on a pure Headless CMS. And managing SEO, search engine optimization, can be more tricky because it's you don't have necessarily all the plugs and levers and buttons and control as you did before because it's pure a pure database, while a more marketing suite type of CMS have like integrations with SEO specific tools. And a pure Headless CMS, which is practically a database, they lack a tree structure often. So it's more a free-floating type of content. It's can be more difficult to get a complete overview of how your content is structured or hierarchically organized. So that's a thing to be wary of. And URL handling. Editors can't manage the URL in Headless CMS. It's up to the developer to create rules, and while you can, of course, collaborate with the developer to create good or reasonable rules, sometimes you might want to modify or change the URL to your to diverse purposes, but that can't necessarily be done so easily in Headless. So that's also a point to take in mind. But there is still hope for marketers and in regard to Headless CMS and these challenges, because there exists an alternative that is the best of both worlds. Like Hannah Montana said it in her legendary outing. And this is the form of hybrid CMS. Let's take an example. If you have a project and you only are a digital project and you only want to create a website, a traditional CMS is the alternative for you. If you only want to make an app, a headless CMS is only for you. But if you want to mix websites and apps, a hybrid CMS can be the best solution and option for you guys. A headless CMS is truly the best of both worlds because it keeps the link between content and presentation, which is what marketers and editors wildly prefers. But, and this is the great but of a hybrid, a positive but, it offers APIs to deliver the content headlessly to other channels. So a true hybrid CMS is both visual and keeps a form-based structured content editing experience. And yeah, you get to eat your cake and keep it too, so to speak. Hybrid CMS essentially is traditional editing experience. We like it, plus headless distribution. Developers like it, and your audience might like it. And to round it all off, we have some headless examples of Enonic XP. Schibsted, you might have heard of it. They have it's a large Norwegian newspaper and media organization. They have an anti-churn solution, which is based on Enonic XP and using headless Enonic and pure headless mode. And they use drag and drop modules to help create this solution. And it's a very successful solution for Schibsted because they managed to keep more of their customers in this way. Customers who elsewise would have just dropped off and never returned. Another example is the Norwegian Directory of Health. They use a highly reusable content model. We had a meetup earlier, 1 year ago, 1.5 years ago, about this, and there the principle of atomic content design was introduced. If you wonder what that is, it's you can read it on our blog, of course, but I can tell you very shortly. It's it means that you break down all their content into their smallest meaningful constituent parts that can be reused in larger context. For instance, they have a guide or guidelines to how to treat flus, for instance. And that's page consists of several parts like symptoms, diagnostics, and treatments, and all these parts are feeded into the page from their smaller parts, which work on their own because you can also search for instance, diagnosis of flu, and that can be a single part. So that's a very rough explanation of the atomic content design. So for the Directory of Health, it means that the content is published to websites and an API, and the API then again distributes the content to any specified channels. That can also be external channels in their in their instance. They're sending their content to several third-party apothecary or drugstore businesses. And the last example is Nav. This is the social, I don't know how to explain it in English. It's the social client organization in Norway. And they use a Next.js. It's a front-end framework. And they have a seamless integration with the Content Studio, which is the CMS interface of Enonic XP. And they uses the Enonic Headless API to distribute content around the pages. Yep, and that was the examples and a very quick and rough rundown of Headless CMS from a marketer and for marketers. So if you have any questions, please ask away. Thank you.